Sam's cup of tea. Sam's cup of tea.
So with Obi-Wan Kenobi releasing, I thought this was the perfect time to talk about my love for the prequels and the impact that those three movies had on my upbringing, my childhood, so to speak. Recently, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen have been doing a lot of press and talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi, but also they've had a chance to talk about their experience working on the prequels, but also how the perception has changed, even noticeably for them. Now, it's no secret that when the prequels were released, by the way, I've got a lightsaber in my hand, so it's no secret that when the prequels were released, the reception wasn't that great critically and, overall to a lot of the people with voices back then. This was pre kind of internet how it is now. Fans of the old ones that were maybe now older and adults, it just didn't resonate with them. However, there was another generation that even Ewan McGregor talked about in his interview.
But I think they were appreciated at the time by the generation we made them for, if you like. It's just that there was no social media then. There was we didn't hear their voice as much as you would do nowadays. And at the time, basically the reaction was driven by the critics who decided they weren't as good as the original film or...
And so I guess, having been born in 1990 myself, you could call me a child of the prequels, really. I grew up, of course, with the original trilogy as well, so I don't feel like I was just brought up on that. The first movies, in fact, that I saw were A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and Phantom Menace was released when I was around 9, because it was 1999. I just want to talk in this video about, make a positive video about the prequels. I know a lot have, but I want to talk about my experience, how I experienced them, and how it was even then. I remember there was a stigma attached to enjoying them or being excited about them. I recall being very young and episode 1 coming out and having been a fan of, the originals, and that we were going to get these prequels, these new films that were going to explore the origins of Darth Vader. As a kid, I was just so excited for that, with the new technology and the lightsabers and all of the things that they could it's like there were films when I was young that I grew up on, like Aliens and Terminator, these 70s, 80s classics that my parents kind of indoctrinated me into loving. But I just love them because they're great movies. But loving, like Aliens, I've seen that so many times, Alien and Aliens and Terminator, and of course the original Star Wars trilogy, where I'd seen it so many times on VHS and become such a fan that I was so envious of what must it have been like to go to the cinema and see that for the first time and be sort of old enough to appreciate all of the excitement around that time. And so episode 1 was kind of my chance to do that, right? I was going to be able to go to the cinema and see a Star Wars film that no one's seen or I haven't ever seen on the big screen. And, there are... Looking at each of the 3 films, of course there are things that don't match up. They're not Oscar-level movies. There is cardboardy dialogue. There's some bad CGI. There are plot holes and things that don't make sense. But overall, the 3 films as a sort of trilogy and the impact that it's had on the generation has been huge. And there is a lot of, not just ironic, memey stuff, because there's a lot of that, but there are genuinely some great things in the trilogies. And so starting with episode 1, I recall going there and seeing the incredible pod race, seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi played as Ewan McGregor, and Darth Maul, and Liam Neeson playing Qui-Gon Jinn, who just embodied a Jedi Master at the peak of the Jedi Order, or during, it was our first look at what the Jedi were like. In the originals, we didn't get to see that. And it created this world that felt bigger. There was kind of politics going on. And I know that it gets bashed a lot for opening up as, trade disputes or tax disputes. But as a kid, I I reveled in that. I think sometimes kids kind of like to be thrust into a world that they may not necessarily understand completely, right? So it kind of gave Star Wars, in a sense, a lot of depth, right? There's just so much to enjoy. The score, the performances, the characters, the pod racing, of course, the duel at the end, which was incredible, and also just a lot of really cool new introductions to the Star Wars franchise. One thing that you cannot fault the prequels for is originality, or, you know, being inventive. They don't rest on their laurels when it comes to the original trilogy. It's not a copy and paste. There were droids in this. There was the Jedi Temple. There were completely new planets like Coruscant, which you don't really ever get to see in the original movies. We get a return to Tatooine, but we also get Naboo. We get double-bladed lightsabers. We get Jedi that can spin their lightsabers quicker than anybody did in the originals. You get pod racing, which was a completely new thing. We get, I mean, everything is different in this. It's the Star Wars DNA, but it's completely new. And I just remember going to the cinema and being so gutted with the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. It really hit me as a kid, and that final battle is so tense behind those red laser walls when he's waiting to fight him. And it's just, there's a lot of things that are really done well. And then I remember having seen it at the cinema, the agonizing wait for it to release on VHS, because back then you couldn't get streaming services. You couldn't go online and find a hooky version of the movie if you really couldn't wait. Literally, it was just waiting for a VHS. And I recall the sort of weekend when The Phantom Menace, Episode 1, was being released on VHS, and I was just overcome with excitement. I wanted to see it again, and I wanted to see it again with my family members at home. And I remember just being so nervous about, what if it's not there? What if we can't get it? And we went to this really small little farm shop in the village, and they had one copy of it. And it was just the cover of it. It was so sacred. And I was kind of bouncing off the walls until later on that evening we got to watch it, because I just wanted to watch it again and again and again. And just amazing memories. And of course, it gave birth to such the incredibly famous theme, Duel of the Fates, which is incredible. And then we skip to 2002, and we get Episode 2, which I'd say out of the three is the weakest, right? It is the weakest film. It's the kind of most dodgy looking in terms of effects. We just recently had another anecdote from Ewan McGregor about how they had to completely ADR all of the dialogue because the cameras were so new, these digital cameras, that they created a hum, and there was a tent nearby, and it was at the same frequency as the human voice. And that probably is part of the reason why that movie seems so wooden. If everybody is basically ADRing their lines, the performances are particularly wooden in that film. And, you know, it's a little bit of a weak movie in terms of the narrative and the overbearing love story. But again, there are crazy cool things that I'll never forget. For example, I had this beautiful art book that was filled with all of the art in Episode 2 with these thick pages. And it was all of the artistry, the designs of the characters, the vehicles, the planetary locations, the gadgets, the props. And it was the most beautiful book. And I used to sit there and draw these concept art characters and practice my drawing through that. Another incredible memory. And, you know, from these incredible designs, the Battle of Geonosis, Yoda fighting for the first time, seeing a bunch of Jedi in igniting the lightsabers and fighting with the clones. Just some incredible things. And of course, it was the first time we got to see Obi-Wan Kenobi as a master and also as Anakin's master. And we got some incredible music with that as well. And that was 2002, so I was about 11, 12, so still very young. Then we get to 15 years old, and it's like these films really aligned with me so well, because we all knew that this was the end of this prequel trilogy, and thus it was going to show Anakin's fall to the dark side. Your imagination was going wild. And it's all about Anakin struggling with, anger and just angst, And being 15 at the time, I've got to admit, that film resonated with me. It's like I grew up alongside Anakin Skywalker. And it's not just what's on the screen, it's your imagination. As a kid, you bring as much or 100,000% more into the films than you even get from them. So in between each film, I was filling the gaps in my head of what was happening in the Clone Wars and who Anakin was. And then to see episode 3 as this incredibly epic space opera, tragic end was unbelievable. And it really resonated with me. I must have seen that film about 4 or 5 times at the cinema. And out of the 3, I would say it's the strongest one because it has such a hefty task out of all of 3 of them. And it does such a brilliant job. It's not without its flaws, but visually it still holds up. I watched it again recently and it was fantastic. And there are just so many moving parts to that film that it has to wrap up. I think it does it so well. We obviously get the reveal of Palpatine being the Emperor, and which is just perfectly delivered by Ian McDiarmid, who is obviously a theatre actor, and all of that skill set comes out on perfect display. But we also get an incredibly moving performance by Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's one of the most memed films. Hello there, Higher Ground and all of that. But it's such a great performance of him where he has this lightness and this charismatic, dependence of the character Ben Kenobi. But also we get to see him heartbroken when he sees what happens to Anakin, when Anakin becomes Vader. And, Hayden Christensen got a lot of, it wasn't popular, I remember, even in sort of my age to sort of like the prequels or love the prequels. But I remember that even those that kind of like to bash on the prequels, at school, they were also excited about episode 3. And there may have been those that didn't enjoy it, but I just loved it. That film has so many emotionally charged, memorable scenes and set pieces, from the opening, which is one of the strongest openings of Star Wars, with the 2 Jedi starfighters flying quietly, and then they go over the ridge of that ship, and it's just a huge battle over Coruscant, and they've got to rescue the Chancellor. And then it's a crazy beeline to the Chancellor. They fight Count Dooku again. It shows you in the first 20 minutes where Anakin is, right? Where we left him in this last film was him getting his arm cut off, having been completely dominated by Count Dooku. In this one, we see him make short work of him, having lost his master, via injury, gets knocked out. So he fights him on his own. And then we see the kind of dark, thing that he does, beheading him at the behest of Palpatine. But we got just incredible stuff. The fall to the dark side, the relationship with Padme, the secret relationship, the doomed relationship. And then, of course, we get the crazy reveal of Palpatine, Mace Windu with Samuel Jackson, him fighting the Jedi, and then the unfortunate fall to the dark side. And then, of course, we get the famous Order 66, where you see the Jedi being systematically wiped out. And then you get the finale, of course, which is Anakin versus Obi-Wan, which is one of the best duels ever in film. Just an incredibly thematic piece of cinema. Again, with every one of these films and the prequels themselves, I always have these very, very distinct memories of things that make them more than just a one singular event. For example, I was gifted the episode 3 Revenge of the Sith soundtrack, and so I would listen to it on my Walkman and do my paper round with it, and I would listen to all kinds of different music on my portable CD player. This was pre-iPod, guys. This was pre-iPod. Or I just didn't have an iPod back then. I don't think I could afford it. But I had the episode 3 soundtrack. And before that point, I'd never listened to a soundtrack at the age of 14, 15. I never listened to a movie motion picture soundtrack without watching the film. And I can tell you now that I must have listened to that score so many times, because now I know the score beat for beat. Beat for beat. I have it on my Spotify now, and I'll put it on, and it's like, I just know what's coming next. I can preempt it. And I've got to admit that episode 3 features the best score of all the films, of the originals even. I know it's a crazy thing to say, but episode 3's score is unbelievable. You know, if you think that the movie's, you know, a 7 or an 8, the score for that movie is a 10 plus. It's the most emotional of all of the films, and arguably the most epic. It has such great scores like Padme's Ruminations, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, Battle of the Heroes, even the introduction post-credits, you know, after the words go up, you get this incredible Battle over Coruscant music, which is incredible. And Anakin's betrayal and Anakin's dark deeds are all incredibly beautiful orchestrated scores. And of course, Enter Lord Vader, which is an epic piece of music. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. But the point is, with every one of these films, the prequels, I have such fond memories. And what's great to see is Obi-Wan's coming out soon. It's the most excited that I've been. I loved Mandalorian season 1 and 2. I didn't so much like the new trilogy. But in this case, we get to see Ewan McGregor reprise his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's reunited with Hayden Christensen as Anakin and as Darth Vader. And for fans of the prequels like myself and many others, this is just such a beautiful moment that we didn't necessarily expect to happen. And it means a lot more to us than it does to perhaps every other type of viewer that there is. I mean, I just want to sort of say it's great to see this like mass appreciation for the films that I also loved, and see it kind of not just on a forum, but, you know, on the mainstream media, and to see that Ewan and Hayden kind of can see that. And obviously all of the people that worked on the prequels, all of the visual effects people, the sound effects people, everybody, the costume department and stuff, they're obviously seeing all of this play out on the news and the media as well. So they're realizing that, hey, you know, that stuff that we did, all those films, those hours of work, they weren't in vain, and they're not irrespective of whatever fucking Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic gave it. These films meant a lot to people. It's great to see, and I wanted to just share that with you and talk about that. So, and if you've had any great memories of watching the prequels or growing up with the prequels, let me know on the comments below, and say what if there's anything that stood out. You know, what was your favorite one, and how old were you when you watched them? Because I'm sure everybody has great memories of them. Anyway, please subscribe for more videos on movies and games. I do regular content on that. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off.
Sam